Welcome to Radio 5G. Michael Henry Dunn here with the one and only Nancy Hopkins. How are you, Nance?
Well, like I say, I don't want to talk about 5G and depressing things. I just want to connect with you and Eleni, who's sitting behind you, because we need to put some energy out there. And there's so many things that could go wrong or would go
It's
wrong.
the
And hey,
size
there's
of
an
a
asteroid
car.
on its way
That's
to
a
us. I mean, I know.
right. I mean, my Honda
And it's
Civic is
supposed to
bigger than
miss
this
us,
thing.
but I mean,
Whatever. Yeah, so we are radio beyond 5G today, right?
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems out there, and I don't know that we can fix them all, but I just think that we need to, all of us, and not just us, but we need to take the time to just get with each other and talk about what we're seeing and, just put out the good vibes or the angry vibes or whatever we need to purge, to get it out there, to put it out there, to clean it up, or to put out the energy that you fill it with, which is gratitude, appreciation, care, and compassion.
Yeah,
And those four things
exactly.
make love.
And it's as things are running up into the fall and the election and everything else that's going on, we're going to need to do exactly what you're saying more than ever, because God knows there's enough fear and anxiety, and yeah, there's genuine causes and reasons for it. But that's not the path forward. That's not the path to healing or restoration or freedom. Um, and so this is such a challenging time, and and going to get more so, most likely. So where do we start? You've been checking out the RNC, and I've been getting updates on it from Eleni, um, saying that basically, from her point of view, the DNC looked like poorly produced Zoom classes, online Zoom classes, and that the RNC looked like it was done by professionals who knew, what they were sharing. What's your impression?
Oh, that's exactly what happened. I mean, the DNC was a Zoom
Mm-hmm.
conference and spooky. It didn't feel authentic.
Yeah.
It felt amateur-ish. Um, there was
Mm-hmm.
the messaging was terrible, absolutely terrible. Um, I mean, I couldn't
Yeah.
sit there and watch all of their stuff. I basically watched some of it. I watched Fox, okay, and actually the other media outlets intended to put in a lot more
Mm-hmm.
coverage than they did. So I don't know what that was about, except that they thought, well, their audience had dropped off incredibly from what it should have been or had been in the past. The dog is barking at something. You're probably hearing it.
Okay.
Well, hold
All
a
right.
second, Michael.
Well,
Talk for a second. I
what
gotta just see what he's.
what I understand is that if you wanted to watch uninterrupted coverage, you had to be watching C-SPAN. That even on Fox, with the RNC and the DNC, but even with the RNC on Fox, they would cut away in the middle of a speech, right? And they go to a panel that starts to dissect and analyze a speech that they've interrupted and that is still going on. So it's like, what's that about? Maybe we'd like to see the whole speech before we hear the talking heads tell us what it means, you know? So that was,
I agree with that. Yeah, that was. But at the same time, um, some of the just watching. them do their thing
Mm-hmm.
was disconcerting. I mean, if you just sat there and watched it, I would have found it very difficult because you didn't really.
Yeah.
It was so disjointed. I just can't tell you that it just was not a pleasurable experience, in my opinion.
Well, of
The reason the
course.
dog's running around, there's a cat in the yard. We know the cat. I don't
Well,
know what the big problem is. But,
I mean, there's a great
I
line
mean,
of
even
Bill
the
Murray's,
animals are
right?
all
I think
jumpy.
it's from Ghostbusters when he's talking that, they're trying to tell the mayor that chaos is going to descend on New York City. He goes, "What chaos? Like, UFOs?" And Bill Murray goes, "Yeah, I mean UFOs, thunder and lightning, cats and dogs living together." I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I find that hilarious. Cats and dogs living together in your backyard, Nancy. It's the end of the world. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so the RNC,
Mm,
I spend more time crying listening to these people. Um, First off, one of the things that I am really impressed with is every single one of the presenters. They are so focused. They are. I mean, I'm going like they hardly are making. They're not doing. I don't think they're taping it. I mean, some of them are live there, even the live ones, but even the taped ones, they
mm.
are so perfect in their delivery. I mean, I
Yeah,
this is my
me too.
business, listening to the way that people deliver, and I am just there. They are inspired. They get up there, and you feel their passion. You feel the absolute love of this
Hmm.
country and of Donald Trump. And one of the things that the president, well, first off, the president never gets good press at all, but he comes up that, hey, I didn't like the guy either. I mean, I couldn't listen to two sentences before I was like, get him off, I can't hear him. I just
Mm.
didn't vote for him. So when I saw him come out after the timeline
Well, you didn't
change.
tell me
I've told
when
you
it
about this
happened. I
timeline
mean,
change,
this
didn't I?
is.
It, w- oh, this, yeah, this was weird because it had. All right, we're doing the Cosmic Reality Radio show, and we had that was when Colleen Kelly was producing. So it's myself and Walt, and we're just doing our normal, talking about what was happening that day. But every, I don't know, 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes, when they would do a new update on who is looking like they're winning, because remember the polls closed at 7, and at that time I think we were doing, were we do I think we might have
Hmm.
been doing the 7 to 9 slot. I'm not sure, but we did the first hour, and then in the second hour I was playing the music, and up till then it had been Trump, 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 Trump. And I'm telling you, I felt
Hmm.
like the whole house shifted, and then boom. And I went, what the hell was that? And I said, oh my God, I think we just went through a timeline. I mean, a massive timeline switch. I mean, I felt them, I've been able to perceive them, but nothing like that. To the point that when I came back on the radio, I said, oh my God, we just
Well,
went
that's
through a
pretty
timeline
cool.
change.
Yeah.
you know? And then and then after that, it was Trump, Trump, Trump. I
Yeah.
mean, it was Clinton
I
before that, but
remember
it was
that
Trump
that
after
night,
that.
of
It was
course.
all Trump, and it was it was insane. But the timeline change, the man that was running for president, okay, is like everybody else.
Yeah.
There are many versions of ourselves, and so many of us were seeing the version of the real jerk. But when he came out after being nominated, I mean, after being elected the president, he was a different person. His energy was different. Everything about him was different. And I was shocked. I wasn't expecting it. I didn't see him come out and
Yeah.
give the acceptance speech until the next day. and it was like shocking to me because I went, my
Yeah.
God, who is this guy? And I'm going to tell the story because probably a lot of people don't know it. So we saw all that happen, and then later on, Starfire Tor is somebody who has a science, and I couldn't comprehend her science. I mean, it's very, very deep. But the fact of the matter is that she can predict timeline shifts. And so she's been doing this. I've been watching her for, I don't know, a decade maybe. And she was always very, very accurate and kind of confusing. Like I say, a lot of science involved in it. But what she did prior to the election itself was that she was doing kind of predicting if we went down this timeline, what would happen. And every time she would do the math on Clinton, it would
Mm.
be within 3 months a nuclear war. When she do it with Trump, she never got the nuclear war thing. So she realized that she had to
And what's her
influence, and
name again?
she's
I'm sorry,
very
Nancy. Who is
popular. I
this?
mean, I think she's got like
Starfire Tour.
Starfire Tor. In other words, one word, Starfire Tor, her last name. So
Okay.
starfiretour.com, I think, is her website. But she's also on Facebook. And she's also been a frequent. I met her through
Mm.
Whitley Strieber's Unknown Country website and shows that she did with Dreamland. So what she did was I mean, it was a beautiful move because instead of saying to people, "Oh, Clinton says," she said to her followers, the many of them, "Let's do it. Let's do something here. Let's figure out what kind of a person we would want to be leading the country." And I think it was some kind of a quiz or something. I'm not sure how she put it together, but her followers replied, and and it wasn't Clinton or Trump. It was the characteristics of the person. Somebody that is honorable, somebody that is full of integrity, somebody that is, I don't know even what all the requirements that came out of it. This is the person that everybody wanted. It was an agreement of the essence of what would make a good leader, and Trump won because everybody
Yeah.
started focusing on that image. And like I say, if you take, and she's probably got 15,000 people follow her. If you take just a fraction of that, you still got a huge amount of human thought energy out there that is projecting a
Yeah.
certain thought form. And that thought form, I mean, I'm sure that that thought form could have been the difference. I mean, when we say that Donald Trump won, yes, he
Oh
won,
yeah.
but he
80,000 votes
won
you
by the
switch
skin of
in
his teeth.
Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and it goes to Clinton.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So maybe that was the thing that pushed it over. Her doing that with her
Yeah, I
people.
was just going to say, the whole
Um,
timeline
Go ahead.
switch
I'm
thing
sorry.
is so fascinating. What you're describing about actually feeling it in the house, what like the house shook, is that right?
Yeah, it went out of phase. I don't know if you've ever seen phasing, but it was like all of a sudden it felt like it lurched to the left and then came
Yeah,
back, but
because
not as
Maya, Reverend
far.
Maya Nartumit, our good friend, well-known mystic, talks about, major timeline shifts and how they can create what she refers to as a time tsunami. That there's, on huge global shifts, like, for example, the sinking of Atlantis and things like that, where, um, there's literally huge effects in the earth itself. But then there's, time storms. She had a group of pilgrims going over to some of the Mary Magdalene sites in Europe with this amazing retired U.S. Navy commander, our friend Bill Bueller, and said literally there was a time storm that whipped up out of nowhere when they did some powerful energetic work at one of these Magdalene sites. And it's like, okay, we're on a new path now. We just shifted to a different path, and you can feel it in the air, feel it in the earth, feel it in the water, as Tolkien says. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
But one of the things she said about Trump was that he was gonna do the things that were needed to be done,
Well, that
but
sounds
we
like a
would
pretty
be
good
bothered by
description.
the
I
way
mean,
he did it.
maybe you can help me out here because I think, like a lot of people, you were talking about, hey, I never liked the guy, couldn't stand to listen to him, and then there was the shift, and before there was the jerk. Well, I mean, so often because, you know, I've woken up over time, over the last 7, 8 years to the reality of, you know, right, left, red, blue, Democrat, Republican. There's a a dark faction, puppeteers behind both parties. And yet looking at the DNC just seems to be, where dark faction headquarters seems to be at the DNC over the last few years. You know, then there's, yeah, okay. I just so wish the obviously the corporate media is totally anti-Trump. It's ridiculously biased. It's a nonstop barrage, of ridicule and finding everything they possibly can, and not noting or allowing positive reflection of the good things he's doing. It's this nonstop barrage, right? But at the same time, I'm seeing that, and I love great comedians, and I get sick of the great comedians, at least back when we still had talk shows, of doing, endless anti-Trump humor. It's like, come on, guys, you weren't doing this under Obama or Bush, Um, how about a little balance? But I just wish he wasn't giving them so much material. I just wish, that it's like, okay, I need to believe that behind the scenes, the new timeline Trump, you know, is actually, you know, coordinating actions. And it's hard to find evidence of it. Okay, you follow Q, you follow development. It's like maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Um, and sincerely, I really, would love to get your perspective on this because it's difficult sometimes, I mean, I filter out a lot of what the corporate media says, of course, and then I just look at, footage of the guy talking and what he's saying, and I just need some help on this.
You should be watching the convention, because one of the main differences between the Democratic presentation and this presentation is that they had 47 years of Joe Biden that they could have said, Joe Biden did this, Joe Biden did that, Joe Biden, he did all of this stuff. He's a wonderful man. In 47 years, he has only brought forth two
Uh-huh.
bills. Two. Now that's insane, okay? So they don't want to touch that. They didn't even
I
mention
know that was
what was
spectacular by
happening
its
in the
absence.
streets of the cities. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't talk about China. Okay, now China is a big subject because we got into all this
Yeah.
trouble because of China on all levels. Now nobody is anti-Chinese people, but that communist government, okay, communist government has been ripping us off with the collusion
Well,
of
inclusion of the
the United
DNC
States
anyway,
government.
and yeah, some Republicans as well, obviously.
Well, it no, yeah, the no, everybody, they're all black, deep, dark stuff. They're all the same. See, I'm not for the Republican philosophy that I knew and you know from growing up. I'm a supporter of Trump. And that was one of the things that was mentioned by some of the old timers, okay, hosts type things, and guests. They had guests on Fox too. And one of the things that we were all really impressed with is this doesn't
Hmm.
sound like the Republican Party. This is a brand new party. And you
Yeah, it
remember
sure was.
Donald Trump was a Democrat all his life, you know? So and the things that okay, the other thing that's different is this concept of they had all that time to tell how many things Joe Biden did. Well, this was amazing what they did. All right, there was this one woman that came out, and she was there to present the fact that the president has, on his own, been able to give the right to choose to people. Now, what this means is that if they've got some kind of a medical treatment and it's under testing, but you're not qualified for the testing. And what she said is, I'm not qualified for the testing because I'm in such a bad condition that I would fail, and therefore it would be a failure on their test. So they don't want to sign up the people that are really critical. Okay? So what he got them to do was to be able to say to the patient, to say, I know that you've got this
Mm-hmm.
experimental drug. I want to take it. All right? And she's alive today because of it. Okay? So there. Then you have uh, a lobster. He was a lobster fisherman up in Maine. And he's telling how the president has saved his community because the prior administration had put on regulations that killed the fishing
Mm.
community of the New England fishermen. And I don't know all of the ramifications. I didn't know about this. See, I learned more about what Trump has done watching this, and it was astounding. Okay, so that, he's there to tell people this is what the president personally did for me. There was a governor of Iowa who said, we're dairy farmers, and let me tell you what the president did for me. There were black people who were friends. One of the most amazing discussions presenters was Herschel
I remember.
Walker,
Yeah.
who's a football player, and black football
Iceman
player.
Ware.
And he came on and he said, yeah, I mean, the guy is profoundly good in football. But he came out and the presentation again was flawless. But he said, I have known Donald Trump, I don't even remember, I think 37 years or something. He said, he is not just an acquaintance of mine, he is a friend of mine. He said, I was taking my kids to Disneyland, and I asked if Donald wanted, his kids to go. And he said, well, yeah, sure, And at the last minute, Donald went with him. And he said, I still have this image of Donald Trump in one of those teacup
Mm.
things at Disneyland in a suit, you know? And he says, I know racism.
Mm.
He said, that's not Donald Trump. Donald Trump does not look at me as a black person. He looks at me as his friend. And he goes on and telling absolute, one after the other, these people were telling personal stories about President Trump. I'm trying to think of what his name is. He's in Congress, and his nephew had gotten killed in an automobile accident, and he's going to his brother's house, or the family house, and the president called him and said, how are you doing? How's the family doing? I heard about this. And he's talking to the president as he walks in, and he said to the president, would you mind just saying something to my brother? I think it was. And so Donald had a long conversation with the man while everybody else listened on. And that's what they kept bringing out, was how he reaches out personally and does things. There was this man who came out of jail. I think he pardoned this one guy. I hope I'm not getting them mixed up together. But there was this one guy who was a bank robber.
Mm.
And he was a 3-time loser. And he said, I said to Jesus, I said, if you just help me out here, I will work my life for you. You know, I because he should have gone to prison for a long, long time, and he went to prison for like 5 years or something. And so he was like, oh, you know, in this state of gratitude, and he hears the voice of Jesus say to him, "Don't forget your promise to me." So what he did was he actually one of the first people that he went to was the FBI agent that had arrested him, and said, I want to work to bring people that are coming out of jail into an environment where we can help them get back into society. And he's apparently got all of these people now. He's got a big organization, and you know, they all stipulated that when Donald Trump is asked about something and he gives you his word, he showed up at the graduation that they had for all these people. All right, it was like 15 or 20 people that had graduated to get whatever it was that they do to help these people get, you know, themselves so that they can go back into society without repetitive situations. And the president went there and was only supposed to be like a 5-minute speech or whatever, and he was there for an hour and a half because he wanted to give the diploma to each of these people. And when you watch him, you see that there was another really good guy, Scott. What is his name? I think his last name is Scott. But he's a cartoonist, and he was absolutely a Trump. He had the Trump dysfunction syndrome. And out of the blue, Donald Trump asks him to come to the White House. And he tells he did a YouTube on it, and he goes to the White House and he meets Donald Trump in the Oval Office, and he said, I can't tell you what the conversation was, but you know my attitude about the man. He said, but when I was in his presence, in my mind, the only person that mattered to Donald Trump was me. He said, I have never been so absolutely impressed with one individual like I am of him. So on a personal basis, he listens to you, he looks at you, you can see, you just, you know, a casual. I
Yeah,
don't know if you've ever met anybody that was famous, you know, and how they, oh yeah, that's really nice, but you
right.
feel like this,
People,
it's just an act.
people say that about
You know,
JFK,
when you see him, it's not.
too. You know that um, when you sat down with JFK, or when you just stood in front of him and talked to him, his focus on you was total. There was nobody else in the room. You know, and he made you feel like you mattered to him. And okay, is that a technique? Yeah, it gets pretty old as a technique. You know, you're either going to be that or not. So I'm encouraged to hear that about him. Eleni was just chiming in that people said the same thing about Elvis Presley. Yeah, that didn't matter who you were, where you were from. When he was looking at you, you felt like you were the entire world.
Yeah. So okay, some of the other things. See, what I'm trying to point out here is that these people were testifying to the authenticity and authentic person of Donald Trump in their interactions with him, but at the same time, they were relating some very, very, very important details that we don't know about. The
Mm-hmm.
things that he has done
As president,
already.
or
You
yeah,
know, the fact that as president, the fact that if the black people knew and really understood how much he has done for their community, he's had these oh gosh, I can't ever remember this thing. It's where they put a lot of money into an area to develop it. In other words, they're going into black areas, other area, you know, not necessarily black, but areas that they have poverty, they have crime, they've got problems, and putting in funding to build up the small businesses, the infrastructure to be able. And this was Scott was Senator Scott that actually initiated that program that the president just pushed through. The Obama Biden administration had set up some terrible thing, law. I'm not even sure of all the details of it, but it was putting people in jail for marijuana possession for years. I mean, it was just like stacking the prisons with all these people that were minor offenders, and Donald Trump managed to get, I don't know, there's like 3,000 of them or something that were been released under this. And most of these were not violent offenders. They were all not violent offenders. It was
Yeah.
like the sentencing was way too much for the crime. And I hate to say this, but you know, at the same time that the federal government was enacting that law, whatever it is, that caused so many people to be able to end up in jail for minor infractions, at the same time, you had, without through the United States, a turnover to private prisons. And you needed to put a lot of people in these prisons so that
Oh
the
yeah, and there's
private
instances
prison
where
people could
judges
make a
were actually
profit.
selling convictions to prisons. You know, uh, yeah, a judge was
Oh, I
convicted, went
hadn't
to
heard
prison. I'm
that one.
glad to say, because he had a kickback deal for however many prisoners he sent to the prison corporation. It's about as evil as it gets.
Well, yeah. Oh my God. I mean, at a while back, I was looking at all this stuff, and it's just horrendous. Well, I had a friend of mine that got into it. I mean, he got put in jail, and I'm going, what is happening here? And when I realized that there was all these private prisons all
Yeah,
around, I'm like,
it's
oh my
mass
God, this
incarceration.
is
The United
crazy.
States has
you
has a
know?
larger percentage of its population in prison than any other country in the world. I think that includes China, and a grossly disproportionate percentage of those people in prison are black. It's it's profit. It's a profit deal, and yeah, it's well, exactly. I
Sounds
saw a
like
program
slavery
by
by another name.
it's a black lawyer, Harvard trained lawyer, um, and he did this one man show in LA a few years back. Really brilliant, brilliant presentation of this whole reality behind mass incarceration, and and he's talking about the Patriot Act and 9/11, and he said, you know what I saw happen with the Patriot Act when suddenly all you white folks are lining up in lines and you're going through metal detectors and you're taking off your shoes. And he said, the Patriot Act was what, and this is a black man talking. He said, this is the niggerization of America. Welcome to what it's like, folks. So in terms of what, 9/11 was about in terms of,
Wow.
you know, entrainment of the whole population to submission, and that's what's happening now with COVID, and so if he can do conscious pushback against that system, well, kudos to him. Keep him in office. But as I look forward to November, it's just I think whichever side wins, the other side is going to claim fraud. Uh, and we're in for Donnybrook. And unless Trump wins by a landslide, it's going to have to be a landslide where they just can't fight it. You know, I think that's really the only way we'd see a peaceful transition.
Well, let's hope that that scenario that you're imagining doesn't happen, because I heard this nightmare scenario where, okay, neither one of them has enough to get the electoral college vote. Okay, they come to a balanced tie. Neither one of them has enough, and so at that point, whoever was talking says the stipulation would be that Nancy Pelosi would be
No, no,
president
I think,
until they could have
in the
another
event that
election.
there's an electoral college tie, which has happened before, right? It goes to, yeah, it goes to the House of
Oh, it has.
Representatives
Yeah. No, I hadn't heard
votes
that.
for which candidate will win. In which case, since the House is currently Democratic, it would be Biden. But in the event that there are massive lawsuits in every battleground state, which are already being prepared. They're already, both sides are preparing to, basically, come the first Tuesday in November, we do not have a winner and everybody goes home by 10 p.m. as NBC is the first out with the prediction, this is the new president. No, we have a replay of 2000, Bush v. Gore, only, 100 times worse. It's not just Florida as the, great hanging question, hanging chads in Florida. It's like a dozen different states with a dozen different, contested electors and contested, counting and fraud and all the rest of it, such that now in that scenario, this is your Pelosi scenario. In that scenario, the Electoral College meets in December, and it's been a formality for a long time, but this time it wouldn't be a formality. Just kind of like 2000, when Al Gore participated in his own destruction because he decided not to fight it. Um, it would be if there is no Electoral College decision because of the secretaries of state of each state have not been able to certify the results of their election, that's when, this is the Pelosi scenario, the president's term expires on January 20th. And we're in a constitutional crisis, and we do not have a newly elected president. And so it would be, well, the third person constitutionally in line to the presidency is the Speaker of the House. And so, sort of de facto, as Trump's term expired on January 20th with no officially declared winner, then that scenario is what people say. That's the Pelosi scenario where, hey, somebody's got to be president. According to the Constitution, it's the Speaker. That's my understanding, anyway.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's kind of the way I saw it. But it's stunning. I mean, so there's so many things that could be in front of us as far as this goes. And yes, the key is it has to be a massive landslide. Now, when we started this show
Right,
just
yeah. We
before
still
it, you
haven't
said,
gotten
"Well,
to
what's the
that,
good
have we?
news?"
I'm counting on you, Nancy.
you know, the good news. Well, there's a woman out there, a psychic, Yustava, and she said way back when that nobody would run against President Trump. She said every time I look at it, there's nobody opposing him, and that there's nobody threatening him. So if she's right, and she's been right about a lot of things, and if they agree with
Sure.
what I want, I kind of like support them. I'm of the firm conviction you can't predict the future; you can only create the future. But let's assume that she's right. I mean, right now, well, another one of the really impressive speakers at the Republican convention was this young man. I think his name is Sandman, and he's the guy that had the red baseball cap, the
Right, Covington,
"Make
my
America
dad's
Great,"
hometown, Covington,
Magna
Kentucky.
cap
Okay.
on. Oh, really? How interesting. Well, he had gone down there with a church group. They were Christians. And he tells a story about how he ended up with that hat. And he said, how is it that, years before me buying this hat that I happened to wear to this
Yeah,
event put me in front of the world? Yeah. And he said that okay, the contention was that he had a smirk on his face and he was being antagonistic towards the people and everything. No, it was the hat. The guy just walked up to him and got into his face, and he was like, I I kept thinking, don't
right.
do anything that will embarrass your family. Right? So he just watched the guy and stood there with a smile on it. It was kind of
Sure. And
smirky,
who's to
but
say,
it's
you
also a
can't define
nervous
a
smile,
smirk objectively,
you know? Right. Right, exactly. So, um, and the fact that this one person, because he's got a hat on that says is in support of Trump, that he gets attacked verbally. Well, with this time with a drum, um, is an indication of the fact that nobody out there wants to be trying to advertise Trump
Hmm.
because of the repercussions. They the people out there that are have this dysfunction, which I'll make a case
Mm.
for is
Yeah.
electronically inspired. Okay, um, those people are they can get very violent. They can get very nasty. And I don't even blame them because it's like they've been electronically it's triggered to hate. And so I kind of look at them as victims. You've been targeted, you're a victim. You got to get past this. Now, the people that aren't being targeted like this, we're at an energy level that's not is not configured so that this
Yeah.
electronic triggering happens. In my case, if you say Trump, I feel an immense amount of love. And if you say Trump to me before, it
Right.
was like, "Are you crazy? Why would you?"
Right. It's funny how,
I mean, I was one of
you
them. I
get
know.
this from both sides. I know what you're talking about with TDS, right? Trump derangement syndrome, as it's referred to. Yeah. And from the other
That's
side,
right.
and I'm pretty good at mentally putting myself in the other side's shoes to see what it feels like to be them. I made my living as an actor for 15 years with that skill. You put yourself in the other people's shoes, and then they just automatically say the exact same thing about uh, Trump people, that they're conditioned and programmed and brainwashed and deranged, and they can't see reason. How could anybody in their right minds possibly support that monster, right? So they must be either brainless or brainwashed, right? These are the options. And but there is. I've seen it myself, and I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm just trying to find the path forward for America, and I, still kind of hopeful that Trump, um, that behind the scenes of what seems like chaos, that the White Hats or Q or whomever is helping restore the republic and freedom and save us from 5G and God knows what else. I'm open-minded, but um, I was on Facebook, and there's I got a couple thousand so-called friends on Facebook, right? Some of them I know, some of them I know real well, some of them I kind of hardly know. Anyway, so there's this woman in Wisconsin, connected to my family. We had a farm there. She had a farm nearby, her family, but yeah, I kind of follow her posts. And this is in the wake of the Portland and the Seattle riots, a few weeks back. And and I'd been following, the BLM story. I'd been following, the specifics of what happened to George Fletcher, the specifics of the, you know, the very strange circumstances whereby that man was killed. Um, and Floyd,
You said Fletcher.
thank
It's
you,
George
Floyd.
Floyd.
Where keep
I don't
getting
want you to get in
Fletcher in my
trouble.
head. George Floyd, thank you. Um, George Floyd. And then I was following, okay, the Antifa, the possibility of agitators, paid agitators, trying to find, okay, who's got a credible on the scene reporting that I can find credible and that isn't likely to be some other, left side fake news, right side fake news, Antifa fake news, discernment is a tough thing these days. But when I started seeing, people toppling statues of, okay, not only, Jefferson and Washington, but Lincoln, and people, dissing Martin Luther King because, oh, he was really just an Uncle Tom, and gone into the cancel culture, right? And then reparations, we need, you know, BLM is now pushing reparations, 160 years after 155 years after um, the 13th Amendment and the elimination of slavery. Um, I just ventured because this woman was saying something about, well, I'm going out to help deliver meals. I hope I'm not seen as a white savior person, right? Like she needs to feel guilty about doing something good. And I was going, oh man, this is really getting out of hand. And I just innocently said, well, are the BLM people asking for reparations from the African tribes who kidnapped their fellow Africans and sold them to the white slavers? I said that.
Oh my
And it's
God, you
like
said
hate
that.
speech. You're a hater. You're a hate speech. It's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Hey, I'm a card carrying, back when I cared about politics, card carrying Chicago liberal. I'm a human rights activist. You're not going to find anything in my background that allows you to just suddenly, go red in the face and call me a hater and a racist because I just said, hey, this cancel culture thing is just, I mean, seriously? 160 years later, seriously? And boom. And I should have known better. I really should have. So I proactively, um, preemptively unfriended her before she could unfriend me because then she chimed in. Somebody else said, "Yeah, he's a hater," and I said, "Hey, if you really want to go back to it, our treatment of Native Americans and the Pope's papal bull of the doctrine of discovery, which allows you to treat all Native Americans in the world as subhuman so that you can convert them to Christianity and then, oh, by the way, enslave them so that they're digging your gold mines for you. I mean, that's the real foundation of racial injustice in America. And if we really want to, start to undo that karma, we need to ask Pope Francis to rescind the papal bull of the doctrine of discovery that, allowed the colonists to do that. And that doctrine, that papal bull, is the legal basis underlying enormous land claims to this day. Well, we're white Christians, and the Pope says we have the right to take your land. And if you rescind that, it's like, I don't know, like you got to give back Manhattan. I mean, that's how serious it would be, but it would be the morally correct thing to do, and we'd sort it out from there. Anyway, I'm just pointing this out as and then they just transferred that attitude, of course, to the African slaves that they brought over. We just decided to make you subhuman, and the Pope said so. Um, so anyway, remember, they just put me through instantaneous, righteous rage that I dared even bring it up. So I should have known better.
But that's the problem, is that we shouldn't have known better. We've got the First Amendment, if we believe in the Republic. And I'll tell you something. People that really know me know that I do rants on
Right.
the corporation, the U.S. corporation that's running this country. Well, not anymore. Okay. One of the telltale signs of it is
The
the
Admiralty.
American flag that has the fringe, the gold fringe. Okay. That indicates admiralty. That indicates corporate. That indicates that you are not under a republic, you are under the corporation of the United States. Okay, so for a while, there, the flags in the press room of the, where the president gives press, they didn't have the fringe. Okay, then the fringe came, the flags with the fringe came back on it, and I'm going like, okay, what's this? But in the Republican presentation, all of the flags do not have fringe. And that includes last night when Melania Trump gave her speech in front of the White House. All the flags
Okay,
did
can you
not
compare that to
have
like
the
Obama
fringe.
presentations?
No, but I would assume, I mean, I wouldn't have been looking at it there, but I'm see, because I've never seen the White House with not flying the gold trim, except that one little few weeks where they didn't seem to be in the press conference. Um, no, wait a minute. Yeah, I'm not sure, but there was something there that twigged me to the fringe. And so when you're not flying a flag that's got the fringe, you are not operating
Right.
under the corporate rule. Yeah, all of its symbolism, all of its symbolism. And I'll tell you something. If you want to hear the good news, if it's true, I can't tell you if it's true or not. Um, when we go to break, I'm just going to tell you. Okay, so Jan Shaw did a show, and she was reading about she does current events, and she was reading about this one presentation where right after he got president, in I think it was still January, February. I mean, it was right away. It was it's probably February, March, but it was right away. He did a world trip. He went to all over the world, different places, and this article is about the photographs that were considered like the official, in quotes,
Hmm.
photographs of whoever he met with. And he went through country by country, Saudi Arabia, Israel, the European Union, the pharmaceutical companies, all sorts of different uh, South American, I mean, just different places that he went during this thing, and analyzing the official photographs that came out of it. And in every one of these photographs, the person who is the leader of like the country, or like okay, at one point, and I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was Japan. Um, Donald had the sword. Now Donald was holding the sword, all right, and he had it in the downward position, which is an indication that Japan, through the symbolism, had surrendered. Okay,
Yeah, I
Saudi
think I saw
Arabia, I
these
can't
pictures.
remember.
I
I should pull
remember.
up the
Yeah.
pictures to remember what it was. I have them up. I put them up on the promo for Jan's show on YouTube. So, if you're really interested in this, and there's a link to the article, I kind of disagree with a couple of them, but most of them were, yeah. Like the one that was most impressive was the uh, governor of California and somebody that was important, and maybe it was a city official or something, but Trump had gone down to see, I guess, the fires. I'm not sure why he was there, but he's standing there, and those two, and they said for over, 3 minutes or something, these two in the photo op session had their hands behind their back. Again, another indication of surrender. So what this all over the world, Israel, I mean, every one of them had something that indicated surrender to this author. Now, let's
Okay.
just assume that that may be true. Well, then you look at it and you go, well, maybe this is a worldwide fight back against the dark forces. Maybe it is worldwide. Supposedly, the Chinese guy is not a bad guy; he's a good guy. And they make all these. They
Well, this
keep
is
acting. You talk about acting.
yeah.
We
I
don't
got a
really
little
know
story to
who's
tell
who's
about
real
this
and who isn't.
actually, which is this
Good,
idea
good, good.
that there is an alliance, a pushback against the cabal, against the NWO, right? And I would love for that to be true. And if these symbolic indications that you're describing are for real, and yeah, there are people who know how to read those, and other leaders know how to read those protocol symbols, ritual symbols, energetic indications of submission, etc. And the idea that, okay, there was an alliance of nations who had decided, hey, the European banking families do not have our best interests. So did, and done with it. So back 11 on a yacht, there was a gathering of about,
Okay, I'm not sure what's
oh,
happening, but you're
interesting.
breaking up. It sounds
All
like it
right.
might be a
Can you hear
Skype
me?
thing. Okay, maybe
How are we
it's
doing?
over. Give it a try again. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
but
the
go back
idea of
about
an
two
alliance,
sentences
right?
at
You hearing
least.
me all right? Okay.
Yes,
Um,
okay, go ahead.
the idea of an alliance doing a pushback against the cabal. Back in 2011, in Monaco, on a big yacht, there was we'll call it secret. Yeah, it was a secret meeting of about 57 finance ministers or other high government officials from 57 different countries. And you could look this up online. It's called the Monaco Accords. And it was organized by Neil Keenan and through a helpful government official in Switzerland around the idea that the global collateral accounts, which are trillions of dollars in assets buried in Southeast Asia by the Japanese, which were afterwards the underpinnings of the global financial system, the International Monetary Fund, Bank of International Settlements, and that it was supposed to help restore the war-torn world, but the cabal basically co-opted it, defrauded it, and used it for black ops, false flags, etc. Kennedy saw through it, tried to pull the rug out from under this whole operation, and of course they took him out. Sukarno of Indonesia was helping Kennedy. He was upended in a revolution. So it's a long story that gets to the Monaco Accords, but let me just shortcut it by saying that Keenan was representing some elder Chinese families that had these bonds they'd been given by the Fed, which the Fed was attempting not to honor for all the gold they'd taken. And so Keenan learned about the whole story of the cabal, the plan to enslave humanity, and and it's a long story. Go to neilkeenan.com, the Keenan Group, look it up. He's got a pretty thorough history of it. He's just published. But the interesting thing to me is about the Monaco Accords. Um, he specifically says this was the beginning of an international alliance to push back against the banking cabal. So they're in this big yacht in Monaco, and word has apparently leaked about this gathering to the Rockefellers. And so who shows up at the gangplank of this yacht but J. Rockefeller, Senator J. Rockefeller. And standing on the gangplank is Neil Keenan in his way. And Neil's a former athlete. He's not letting Rockefeller onto the yacht. Rockefeller says, no, I'm supposed to go, it says, don't you know who I am? And Neil says, yeah, I know exactly who you are. And you are exactly who we do not want on this boat. Well, Rockefeller tried to push past him, and Neil actually almost knocked Rockefeller into the drink, and his bodyguards started to act up, but he backed off. They took the yacht out into the sea a little bit so they could have their meeting in private. They got buzzed by Black Hawk helicopters until the Swiss finance minister, who was friendly, called in some French jets, which then buzzed the helicopters and allowed them to have their meeting in peace. So the reason I tell this story is, that's 9 years ago. I subsequently worked with Neil in Indonesia and was his communications director for a while, and wrote some freelance journalism from Indonesia about all this. So as you're describing, Nancy, the idea that there are symbolic indications in some of these meetings and other indications that there actually is an alliance that is, doing some pushback. There's two things that come up for me. I hope it's true. Um, I did enough reporting on the situation behind it to think that it might be true. And I'm also just, inherently suspicious a little bit of, beware the saviors, because the saviors get on top, and the likelihood historically that the saviors are going to turn into another version of the villains is something to be really careful about. Anyway, that's my little story.
Well, as far as saviors, George
Right.
Washington could have claimed a throne over America, and instead he became a president. and that's what made the republic. Well, I just think that maybe Donald Trump is the, you know, George Washington was one of his reincarnation peoples. Maybe he's got the same thing. I'm not, because you can't, you don't, I mean, all this idea that he wants to be king of the world is just BS. He's done more for the black people, the Asian people, for women, for all sorts of, I mean, we had the lowest unemployment ever before the pandemic hit.
Right.
You know, so we're going to take a break here, and then we'll come back
Let's
and try
go.
to find you some more good news, maybe. You're not going to hear the sound because
stay
of this
tuned.
new system, so I'll just, when you hear me cut
Okay,
in,
folks,
it's going to
Radio
be
5G, taking a
just
break. See
under
you in a
5
bit.
minutes.
Humanity, living in peace, sharing with love. Humanity, living in peace, sharing with love.
You know we've had enough of all your silly stuff.
We've had enough.
And now we must live again, free of your sins again. It's time to begin again. You know it has to be. Won't you show me the way? I'm not telling you, I'm not pushing you.
Humanity.
You know we've had enough of all your silly stuff.
We've had enough. Wake up to your power and wake up to your love. Wake up to your sacredness, humanity.
And we are back.
I
Michael?
am here. Hey,
Hello, are you
welcome back,
muted?
everybody. Okay, we were about to get to the good news, right, Nancy?
Well, the good news is that the scenario that's behind everything and behind everything and behind, it's like layers of onions. Um, that's the good thing. you know, um, that's one of the good things. That I think that that's all real. Whatever it is, there's something much grander because oh my God, you look at you listen to these people. And oh, I wanted to point this out. This is a strange one. You know, the president. Okay, he's very concerned about a fair election. He doesn't. And I really do believe that he wants to just to be fair because he believes that if it's fair, he will win. So, and then what happens after if he doesn't or what? I mean, you're talking about civil war. You're talking about the great divide in the country. I think it's a very, very dangerous scenario. He has to win by a landslide. So the American people have to stand up. And I'm a Florida citizen, and I'm a Democratic. I'm a card-carrying Democrat. Just got a new card, um, and I'm an absentee voter because here in Florida you can ask for a ballot. Then they give you have to fill out the form, give them all this information. Then they send the ballots directly to your house. So, it's not likely that's going to be a problem. Where the problem comes in is when you send it back.
Right.
Who's counting it? What happens there? And so what the president is very concerned about is this crazy ass mailing out millions and millions of ballots to just everybody and anybody. I mean, they may be using voter rolls, but people are not there anymore, and you got all these live, quotes, live ballots out there, and who's going to get these things, and what's going to? I mean, to me, it's a nightmare. Why would you even try this? Now, there's like three states that have already, it's all done this way by the mail. But they said that it took 5 years. The guy in Washington said it took 5 years for
Well,
us to get the
yeah.
system working correctly. We
Well, it's
can't.
interesting because
We can't
go
do
ahead.
this. And what's the difference about waiting in line at
Exactly. Hello.
Walgreens and waiting in line to
I
vote?
just drove up to Boulder,
Where's the
Colorado. We're down
danger?
here in southern Colorado, high in the mountains, remote, beautiful. Rather be here than anywhere right now. We drove to Boulder, and we wanted to go to a Trader Joe's. It's a market chain, and you gotta wait in line, you know, get proof to your mask, your gloves, you're 6 feet apart in little pods, and they got a little shade, little shade tents for you. Okay, it's okay to do that, or wait in line at Walmart to have them check your mask, but what, not to vote? We can wait in line for the supermarket, but we can't wait in line to exercise the rights for which our ancestors bled and died. Really? I mean, but when you talk about voter, corruption and voter fraud, of course it's on both sides. It's on both parties, and it's precinct by precinct and, state by state. It's very difficult to, do say, oh, there's one massive strategy by some bad guys in one party or the other. It's all over the place, and Republican Party is in voter suppression laws because right from the very beginning, whatever, the corporatist party used to be the Democrats at one point, then it became it switched around. It does not work for them to have all the people vote. Democracy is, the actual where people all go to the polls and vote. The Republicans lose when more people vote. And so their strategy has always been, and this is for decades and decades, how can we suppress voter rolls? How can we, do that? And on the Democratic side, you look at what happened to Bernie Sanders and the voter fraud there. You look at, on the Republican side, electronic voter fraud in Ohio in 2004. Independent statistical analysis, precinct by precinct, the variance between the exit polls which have been historically accurate to within a couple of percentage points, the variance between the final result and the exit polls in just enough precincts to turn Ohio to W. Bush is statistically impossible. All right. So, what do you make of that? That variance where the exit polling said, yeah, Ohio's going to carry, and then just enough precincts turned and were significantly at odds with the exit polls, and it gave Ohio and the presidency, back to W. Bush. It's on both sides. So, what we need if we actually want to restore the republic, you know, you got to show up and vote for sure, exercise, be concerned enough to actually show up and vote or mail in. Hey, it's a right. But, you know, we got to go back to paper ballots and we got to use blockchain. We got to use, absolutely ironclad, verifiable means so that your vote is actually counted. And I don't think we're there. So uh, that's why this, to me, the actual results of this election, geez, it's a free for all. It's like both sides know the other side is cheating, and so they're going to try to massively cheat on both sides with the moral justification. Well, hey, the others are cheating. We got to cheat better, smarter, more clever, so that we end up on top against those cheaters over there. Does that make sense?
Oh yes, it does. And I've never trusted the electronics. Now there's a story back from was it Romney? Yeah, it was Romney. Okay, so Romney is losing, and he kept saying Ohio's going to go for me. Ohio's going to go for me. Not to worry. And what I understand from you know you probably can't find this out there. At the time you could, but it probably got covered up pretty good. Um, they had a fix-in for no matter what the situation,
I remember.
Ohio was going to go for Romney, an electronic fix, you know? And one of the reasons that I believe that my version of what's happening in that the anonymous group is working with government people, people in the military, people all over to create what we call the plan. One of the reasons I believe this is because Anonymous was given credit, the people from Anonymous were given credit for stopping that electronic
In order to keep Obama in
intrusion.
office.
They blocked it.
Yeah, I remember that there's a moment, right? A famous moment
Yes.
with Karl Rove,
Yes.
and he's a network consultant up there, um, and the numbers come in and they say we are just declaring Ohio for Barack Obama, and Karl Rove practically goes apoplectic. He said, "Wait, wait, wait! No, 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 no! That's not possible. No, double check that. That can't be right. That can't be right." The Republican insider Karl Rove was just as sure as Mitt Romney was that Ohio was in the bag. Yeah.
Yeah, because they thought they had a fix in. But the white hats knew they had done this and were able to block the signal that
Okay.
said,
Well, so if
no, it's got to go this way.
if that was a white hat move, what was the restoring the republic rationale? We're assuming that's the white hat agenda behind keeping Romney out and Obama in 2012. Yeah.
I have no idea as to what the details were. Maybe they knew things about Romney
Yeah.
that made him very, very iffy. More so, at least, better to be in bed
Yeah,
with the
well, it's
person
funny
you know than the
because,
one you don't.
there's all this stuff about Russia collusion, right? And I've read from, credible sources that in fact, Putin would have been happier with Hillary Clinton getting in because she's predictable. I mean, of course, yeah, does Clinton have dirt on Trump? It's everybody's business to have dirt on everybody. Of course, they all have dirt on everybody. Whether or not they can use it is another question. But, the idea that Putin was working behind the scenes to get Trump in. And, one story I've heard that I think is worth, evaluating is that in fact, Putin said, hey, I know Hillary Clinton backwards and forwards. I also have stuff on Hillary. She's predictable. Trump is a loose cannon. I don't know what the heck Trump's going to do. I'm not saying I'm absolutely convinced of that story, but it makes more sense than the other.
Well, the idea over here in America is that it doesn't matter who's
Mm-hmm.
president as long as it's our guy. That the it's not Democrat, Republican, it's not black or white. It's a class division. Those that are in power and those that are
Yeah,
not.
the
And
American
that's us
people, you mean?
guys. And you know, the American people. So you can't trust any of them because you don't know. I mean, for me, I mean, I've lived a little bit here, and for me, my final analysis of politicians are that I don't trust any of them because I think you got to be
Well,
insane to
yeah.
want to be a politician. you know, when you think about what you're being asked to do, you're being asked to. I mean, they've got bills and documents that are inches thick, and you're supposed to digest all this stuff to make a reasonable
Right. It's all provided by
decision.
the lobbyists. Here,
It's an
Senator, here's what,
impossible task.
your donors, your corporate donors recommend. Let's put this into the big thick bill and take care of those that got you in there. But so we wanted to share good news. Why don't we, project ahead a little bit here? There's a wonderful astrologer named Pam Gregory. You can just YouTube search Pam Gregory. She's English and really incisive, really smart, um, good spiritual perspective, stays above politics, but points out what's happening in politics. And, her understanding, a lot of other astrologers are saying this as well, is that we're kind of right now on an 8-year trajectory of an attempted clampdown by authoritarian, ruling faction, which are, to subjugate the people, repress freedom, etc. And that the old order is collapsing and that it is going to be a bumpy ride. But as the old order is collapsing, a new, freer, more, doesn't call it democratic, she says, just a leveling of um, where there, instead of it being the haves and the have nots, that the abundance of our Mother Earth is actually restored and available to all. It's not communism, just a level playing field for free enterprise. Remember that idea? Um, and that what's happening now with the collapse of the old order is that suppose Biden gets in, all right. In my mind, the DNC, Democratic establishment, is going to try to go back to the good old days, right? Of their control and dominance and the rest of it. And because of the wake up that's happened, in the last 4 years, it is not going to work. They are not going to be able to go back. Too many people have woken up, and an attempted clampdown, an attempted mass vaccine, an attempted, mask mandate across the country, totally in bed with Gates and 5G and Fauci and all the rest of it. That is going to completely backfire, and we'll see the old order collapse even more. If Trump gets in, he's still being opposed. They will go even more radically. His opposition will be absolutely desperate and pull up, God knows what kind of desperation measures. But in the end, the good news, I hope this is true, is that come around 2028, I think this is what we're looking at, is 8 years of, of a, a struggle for, not a struggle, let's just call it a movement towards restoration and freedom and healing and revelations, of exposures of what has really gone on for all these decades and centuries. So, as to how November plays out and which way it goes, the old order is going to keep collapsing, whatever happens. Personally, I don't want to, in my corner of Colorado, I don't want to have to be hiding out from the vaccine squads. If that's what it takes, that's what I'll do. But it's a really intense choice of scenarios. So let me know, Nancy, if you get any timeline indicators, from galactics or angelics that like, hey, not to worry, we're on the happy timeline now. I would love to hear that.
Well, astrology. Last week, I played in this slot. I played Timothy Glenn with Lance White. He had done a show in 19 predicting what was going to happen in 2020, and then he did one in 2020 just before the shutdown and all that. It was 21st of January or something. 12th of January. It was 12th of January. So it was astounding because this guy was so excited about the stars, the way the stars were lined up. And that, they were lined up like, when this happened and that happened, but now they're in this position that makes it going to go to the good side, not the bad side. And he was so excited about it. And he was very detailed and specific. So after I had heard that, I put together a show. When I heard him in January, I said, God, this guy's good. And so I put together a 2-hour show and put it up on my station and stuff, played it. So I replayed it because, again, it gives you this feeling that we're not just Earth and human beings and 5G and going again. No, it's much bigger than that. This is galactic, at least, if not universe. So when I look at all of the good indicators, I have to believe that, like Mark Steele believes, that God's got our back. Whoever your God is, we're okay. We're doing fine. We just are, this is a story unraveling of how we go from a nightmare scenario of 5G death and control to what we know was the image of the United States when George Washington had a mystical experience where he met some, I don't know where they blew, I don't even remember, but some beings
Yeah, I know that story.
at Valley Forge. He was giving
Oh,
up.
okay.
Well,
Well,
you go ahead, you tell it your
yeah,
way because
there's
you might know. You're
the
better
story that I
storyteller.
heard is that, yeah, it's at Valley Forge. Things are desperate, um, cold, hungry, and Washington, essentially preserved the country simply by preserving the existence of the Continental Army. As long as he was still there and there was still an army, the British were still going to have to spend money and blood to try to subjugate the United States of America. So it's about as bleak a time as you can imagine. And the army was held together by the force of Washington's character and charisma and honor, right? So he would pray every morning. And the story goes that into his tent there came this light. And out of the light came this voice which said, Son of the Republic, look and learn. And that he saw this great strife of the war he was in, and then this light came, blazing through, and they saw victory. And the voice said, Son of the Republic, look again. And then he saw, this darkness coming from Africa, which is slavery, right? And slavery already existed, of course, but it would grow far worse and far larger with the advent of the cotton gin and the industrialization of the cotton industry in the South and the need to import thousands and thousands of enslaved human beings. And again, the voice said, look and learn. And he saw the bloody strife of the Civil War. And again, the light came through and the darkness dispersed. And across the land, he saw the word union emblazed in fire. And one last time, the voice said, Son of the Republic, look again. And he saw America invaded from around the world. Now, you can make of that what you will. Did that represent, the globalist dark faction? Important point to remember here, it is a historical fact that George Washington, in a letter, said, I know for a fact that the Bavarian Illuminati has infiltrated Freemasonic lodges in America. Okay, so, and that's essentially the ancestors of the banking cabal trying to use, the order of Freemasons as a cover for their activities in America, and Washington knew this. So the angelic voice says, Son of the Republic, look again. And so it's America invaded, and, there's terrible strife in the land. And at last, the light comes again. And as long as the grass shall grow and the rain shall fall, the union shall be preserved. Now, that's a rough paraphrase from memory of that story, but the credibility of it is fairly good. Historically, it was something he told later to a friend who recorded it. But that's pretty close, because I've heard that story several times. It was in a beautiful documentary on Washington's spirituality that was put together by a couple of monks that I know in Los Angeles. Beautifully done.
Well,
Yeah.
see, that's a good thing. you know, you know, and it's like I say, I'm not getting any indication that I'm wrong with the feeling that Trump once was George Patton.
Hey, wait a second.
Uh, I mean,
I think I'm talking to
George
somebody who knows
Washington.
that story
George
a little
Washington.
better.
Okay, but there is also a connection to George Patton that's come out. And it's weird because if you see pictures of George and Trump,
of
boy, there
Patton
is
or
a
Washington?
resemblance. Patton. I mean, we don't have any really good photographs of, what George. You don't
Well,
have
this
to
is
look like the person. I mean, I said,
Yeah.
that's not.
I was just going to say,
part of
the
it.
whole
What?
reincarnation
Go
thing.
ahead.
It's great stories, and I am a sucker for a great story. I mean, your connection, Nancy, to the Patton story is a great story to me, and it really lines up with my experience, both of what I know of Patton and what I know of his rumored current incarnation, shall we say? So, but at the same time, you know, it's just an irresistible urge, it seems like, to we need to cast a hero. We need a hero of legend to come back, you know, and be the one who's going to be there for us like he was before. Like, Washington has come back. I mean, I know somebody who thinks Washington is Bernie Sanders. I don't see it personally. Um, and in India, and where reincarnation is, of course, accepted by the entire population, at least the entire Hindu population. um, you run into somebody who says, "Oh, my guru is marvelous." Says, "Well, that's good." And I respect lineages and yoga and meditation and all that, but so often they will say, Did you know that my guru is actually a reincarnation of Vishnu? And I said, really? Yes. Well, I mean, Lord Krishna was an incarnation of Vishnu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is supposed to be a reincarnation of Vishnu. But it's always like you need a resume. Yeah, I need to show you that my guru has an impressive reincarnational resume so that you give me a little more credibility as his disciple. He's like, oh, my guru is a reincarnation of so and so. And I'm going, okay, maybe not. I, people tell me, reincarnational stories about me, nobody particularly special or famous, but it's a tempting story. I think, okay, is it a useful story? Maybe not right now. To me, it's just like more material for us to get made fun of. Oh yeah, not only do they think that there's a pedophile ring that meets in a pizza joint in Washington D.C. and that Obama smells like sulfur because he worships the devil, but they say that Washington Trump is the reincarnation of Washington. Ha ha ha! What a bunch of idiots, right? So I mean, on the other hand, it could be true, and I hope.
Well, okay, now I agree with you totally. I mean, I got no problem with what you're saying. I'm not talking in terms of, George Washington or George Patton coming back and, you know, being now Donald Trump, and it's not trying to say that these people were special and therefore Trump is special. It gives me a it's sort of like it's a
Mm,
story that's not doesn't have an end to it. Okay, because when Patton died, he believed that when he went to war that he was doing the right thing, that they'd won the war, and then he confronted the people that were German, that were his enemy, and he realized that they were more victims than anybody else, and he began to reevaluate this whole concept of what the hell did we just do, and he began to realize that there was a cabal,
yeah,
and it wasn't just in Germany, it
that's
was in
Scottish.
America, you know and so yeah, and so he was still in Germany. He was the military head of the southern part of Germany, and he began to, really question what the hell because he's trying to help the German people, and he's getting no response from higher ups. And then he's beginning to find out about. I'm sure he was finding out about. They had weapons of
Mm,
ET's connection. I'm sure he knew about that, but to make this long
right.
story short, he was assassinated. And the story I've heard is the last thing he said to his wife was, "It's too dark." He first said, "It's too hard." And then he went, "No, too dark." And from my connection to him is that my soul experienced the patent experience. So that's in my
Yeah.
soul bank's consciousness. Okay, so I can tap into that. That's how I know that these things are real. Is that I don't believe I am that person. I am another projection of my soul, but I'm using that. I've been given access because, all right, it's like you got a server computer. The server computer has got all of your incarnations in files. And you, as a PC, says, what the hell is this server? And you start looking and you find out, oh my God, look at all these interesting files. And you open up one, and all of a sudden you're experiencing George Patton's life, the way he was, the way he felt, the way he thought. Boom, it's yours. That's
Yeah, yeah, I
that's
know what you mean.
how
Some people call that a
amazing we
fractal,
are.
right? That you're experiencing, a powerful archetype as a fractal in your own consciousness. Now, personally, I'd buy it. That you not only have access to that, you know, that file, but if a soul is on the journey, the work that you've done since in this life looks like a pretty straight continuation of that same kind of arc in terms of, okay, out of college, you just joined the army to get some good drug counseling training, and suddenly you're above top secret, military intelligence dealing with the Russians, it's probably not too coincidental. It works as a story. Anyway, take it or leave it. But I hear what you're saying about, um, you know, the uh, the ability to access. And the trouble is, like, how many people have I met, women, who believe that they are the reincarnation of Mary Magdalene? It's a few too many, actually. Uh, you know, and are they deluded? Are they kind of crazy? Well, it's perhaps that they are experiencing this fractal phenomenon.
Well, I'm not all that sure that there's that many souls, you know, because who are we to limit the power of the soul to experience? I mean, let's just sort of like, my feeling is that, every soul is a piece of God. All the souls added up make God. God's learned. Okay? But the soul has the same kind of thing, fractions. I mean, like, well, let's try this, let's try this. But it doesn't mean that you can't have that bank of knowledge from Patton in my head because I'm linked to my soul. Because, like Donald Trump, maybe he is another projection of my soul, okay, so to speak, the overall spirit. Maybe spirits have different souls, but it's a learning line, it's a storyline. So in my story, Patton, the last thing
Right.
he said was,
Yeah.
"I will remember." Okay, so then I come along, and if you look at my life and how uncannily it runs very close to the same life he had, in that I went military because of weird things. I mean, never, all these things, these that and I would get information. I would just know things. I mean, I knew about the German connection to the black arts long before anybody else did. It was early 80s when I got that information. Now, why was I led to that? Why was I led to so many pieces of information? It's because I'm being led there by an experience of George Patton and my soul's intention
Right. And to
to
remember,
make it
I
right
mean, you look at the movie Patton, the story that, of course,
and to
Patton
remember.
himself remembered from before. He remembered his former lives. He remembered, being on the long, miserable return from Russia with Napoleon's armies. He remembered Carthage, for crying out loud, Rome and Carthage, when he's there in North Africa. And that, we're talking reincarnation was not like a hip, fashionable thing in the US during, Patton's lifetime. And that was very eccentric uh, behavior from, a top US general, say, I remember the Carthaginians.
Who was
Yeah.
openly talked about it. He openly talked about it. He wasn't hiding it or anything else. Because he'd go to these battlefields and he'd say, "Oh," and he'd get a
Yeah.
download. He'd be like he
Yeah.
was remote viewing it,
Well,
to
so
the
so here you
past.
are, um,
Yeah.
an information war, right? So let's just continue the Patton story. He saw that the hot war that he'd been fighting ended up, being co-opted because of Operation Paperclip and everything else, right? With the Nazis, top Nazis being protected and brought over. Um, so the if you're going to go with the arc of the struggle, it's still going on here on Radio 5G right this second, folks. A continuation of your favorite movie from 1970 with George C. Scott. It makes sense, and now um, there's still the need for soldierly virtues. Um, only the hot war to info war shift is, I mean, both are still in play. I don't know. What do you make of it?
Well, I think that like in my case, the reason that I have such access to reincarnation is because that is the only way that my soul could instill in one person the ability to see so far and to so deep. I mean, I went down that rabbit hole as a 15-year-old, and I've been at it, and I've had many mystical, experiences. I've been trained in energy, like, electronic warfare officer. What the hell is that? I didn't know what electricity was, to be honest with you. But to be trained in certain things that allow me to see the bigger picture. Now, is Nancy Hopkins so special that no, it's a continuation of my whole history. But that whole history does not necessarily mean that I was the only person that is the incarnation of George Patton. And this was when I realized simultaneous incarnations, because we tend to want to limit
Yeah.
the magic of the universe, the magic of our souls and spirits. And to say to somebody, well, you've got a soul that was George Patton and then you were Nancy Hopkins, okay, is very limiting. Because George, at the moment that he died, would have had the opportunity to make every
Right.
decision as to who to be. And I have to assume that at the end of a story, given a lifetime, a given life, at the end of that story, that your soul is going to say, well, now that person, murdered somebody, so maybe we should get them murdered over here, or maybe we could do this, because you're trying to learn, you're trying to build on the learning that you had. So it seems to me that every single lifetime has a multitudinous number of possibilities. And why wouldn't it be? So that's the way I was looking at it, is that you can have simultaneous incarnations in that you both have the past, you're right up to, you're going through and you got the same history, and then all of a sudden there's two of you, you're doing yours, but the history is the same, because it's just we can't
Yeah,
limit
and this is
our
actually
ability to
something that our friend,
experience life.
Reverend Maya Nartumin, talks about, um, simultaneous incarnations. I wish you'd gotten a chance to meet, Bill Bueller, former, U.S. Navy commander, retired Reverend Bill Bueller, one of the world's greatest living authorities on the ley lines of our planet, the grids of Gaia, what he called the Reshal system of, um, knowing how to work with the ley lines all across Gaia, for the upliftment of humanity. But anyway, she received that Bill, in his incarnation as, you know, William Bueller, U.S. Navy commander, retired, he started out shortly after Korea. He was actually one of the commanders in the Gulf of Tonkin incident, which was used as the pretext for escalating the war in Vietnam. And um, Maya received that Bill had a simultaneous incarnation. He's a boy in the U.S., grown up to be Bill Bueller, but at the same time, he's a Luftwaffe commander in the German military. And he was actually part of an inner circle that attempted to take down Hitler. And he either died in battle or was executed, once that plot was discovered. But it's simultaneous, with his, Bill Bueller incarnation. I guess the deal is you don't ever meet yourself. If you're in two bodies at the same time, I don't know if there'd be some canceling out or tilt of the universal order if you actually meet yourself. Again, I have trouble with it just because I like linear stories. I like, and then I learned this and went on to become so and so in my next life. But like, we're trying to limit the universe, and the universe is going to, hey, guess what? Time is an illusion. It's always the eternal now. Everything's happening simultaneously, past, present, and future. So get over it. Yeah, the soul can be in two bodies at once, but it doesn't happen all the time. It's not commonplace. It's supposedly an indication that you're on a evolutionary fast track as a soul. Yeah.
I'm not sure about that. Who knows? But I can tell you the reason that I came to that conclusion wasn't one because of theoretical, well, what if, it wasn't that. I realized that you could have multitudinous incarnations from one pattern, and then pattern could be this person or that. That was theoretical. I mean, I just said, no, this is limiting. You can't limit the potentiality of what we are capable of doing at the soul level or at the human level. And of course, somebody like me that's got access to that server computer is going to have more knowledge because got more experience at my fingertips. All I have to do is say, and this, I was a nurse's aide. A guy was comatose. He was either dying of an insulin, too much insulin, or not enough insulin, and the decision by the RN and the LPN would save this man or kill him. And I'm a nurse's aide. I don't have any minute, nothing. But I was freaked out, and my conscious brain just went non-compute. And as soon as that happened, all of a sudden I started talking. I mean, it was my voice, but I was giving so much medical information to these two RN and LPN that they went, "Oh right, oh my God, you're right." And so they did what I was telling them to do. Okay, but I had no idea what I was talking about. It was like I was channeling something. I'm going like, what was that about? Well, it turns out, because I went and I actually looked at diabetes right after that. I went to a book we had there to find out what the hell I had just said. And so the guy survived. But right after that, I had made this connection. I had felt this entity that had come through me. Okay? And after that, I had so much information. He was a French doctor at the time of Napoleon. And I got so much information from him. And it was weird because when I was... One of the first things, okay, so I didn't know this at the time, but I was asking questions and the universe will always answer it. So I'm like, who is this guy? Okay. The next thing I know, I feel like I'm standing in what? I mean, this is what I was feeling. I mean, it was spontaneous. Remote was what it was. But I'm in this apartment type of thing, looking out a window and feeling really, really bad. And the cobblestone on the ground. And I'm not sure, this was some critical thing that he was going through that I could get into, but it doesn't matter. But when I would be linked to him, I was actually thinking in French. I don't talk French. I flunked it in high school, I mean, it's like I did not do good, got by, but I didn't learn anything. But anyway, the concept of spontaneous, okay, what happened was that I was watching television, and it was this television series which I talk about in one of my books, well, the Cosmic Reality book, and it was a Air Force colonel and his family. That's what the series was all built on in the 60s. And so they were going to be canceled. So they decided they would do this movie version, a 2-hour thing of the assassination of John Kennedy. Yeah. And how the family, experienced it. It was phenomenal. So you have the family drama going on, but in the background, you had a television, a black and white television. Well, maybe it was color. I'm not sure. But there was a television in the background. And what would happen is that on the television, and they were replaying the 3 days of the assassination. And so they would get the sound on the television would come up and the people would start listening to it. And so you were getting a revamp of the entire 3 days while this show goes on, and these people are trying to, deal with what's happening and whatever the drama was. So I'm watching this thing, and I'm just sitting there watching it, it was really compelling. So I was really into it. And they turned to the television, and they showed a video where this man, and I know he had a red hat on, or the little boy had, there was a red hat involved in it. It gets really kind of screwy when I think about that, with what I was watching. But all of a sudden, taken out of my body is the only way I can say it. Now, it could be a remote view. Again, this was early in the game before I understood what I know now about remote viewing. And it could have been a remote view. But that image, that what I saw, was the last thing that Kennedy saw. And what it did was it threw me into either an incredible remote view at that moment or an incredible memory. And I can't tell you which, but I think it was a memory, not a remote view. Because I was not, in a remote view, I would have seen Kennedy. I wouldn't have been Kennedy. And that thing flashed on the television, and all of a sudden I'm live looking at that and grasping. I can't breathe. And I've got my hands up to my neck because I can't breathe. I feel like I'm choking. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And all of a sudden, boom! And it was from the right, and it was through the right temple. Yeah. And so to physically feel what that man, what happened to that man. I mean, I knew at that instant that it was a conspiracy of beyond anything I had thought. I'd been researching it, for probably at that time 10 years, maybe more. But at that moment when all of that happened to me, I was like, oh my God. And the interesting thing is that I believe it was a simultaneous incarnation, which would make so much more sense. Okay? Because that would mean that Kennedy is probably also got a connection to George Patton. We don't know these things. You know what I'm saying? And that would have been a simultaneous incarnation. We just don't know what the different things are. I was alive when Kennedy died. Why would I have, been him? Does this make any sense? Unless you think in time of simultaneous incarnations, because we're not limiting the experiential potential
and there's also the
of our own
possibility,
souls.
of course, that the soul can, project itself into the consciousness of a soul at any moment in time to experience what it was like to be that soul. As you say, maybe an incarnational connection, not necessarily, but that's another perspective on it too. I know there was the famous German mystic Therese Neumann during the 1930s and 40s who experienced the stigmata, right? And every Friday, she would bleed from the hands and feet, and then on Good Friday she would experience the entire Passion of Christ. And Paramahansa Yogananda, the great yoga master, went to visit her. This is during Hitler's regime in Germany, 1936. And she said that ordinarily she did not welcome visitors the day he came, but she tuned in and said, yes, let the man of God from India come and see me. And he mentally attuned his consciousness with what she was experiencing during this stigmata, and experienced essentially the Passion of Christ from the point of view of Christ. So I don't pretend to understand it, but as I say, it's foolish to limit the powers of the soul and the nature of the universe. But what I come back to in your story, Nancy, is okay, so what purpose did that serve for you to have that experience of JFK? What came from that? What did that lead to, that you had that experience? What in your soul drew you into that experience in that moment?
Well, one of the things was that as after that, when I was researching things, I had at one time all of a sudden I was in Kennedy's body, and I know that because it was the Oval Office, and Bobby Kennedy was in front of him, and Bobby Kennedy was saying, "Don't worry about it. We've got an agent in New Orleans. His name is Oswald." Okay, so all of a sudden I'm researching, and all of a sudden I have this experience. And so I'm going like, okay, I'm recalling something. Why was I so adept at following little breadcrumbs to find the truth? You know, I mean, like 80% of what we know now, I knew back in the 80s. You know, why was it? It's because if you make these connections to your higher experiences, wherever they came from, you've just got more knowledge. You're being led. You know, it's like
Yeah.
thoughts are what create everything. And so my reality is, you know, your reality, everybody's reality, is not just what we've experienced in this lifetime. It's how much do you know from your other experiences? I mean, what is evolution? Isn't it maybe taking and being able to access all of that information that you've been doing for
Right.
thousands and thousands of years, if not more, to access it, to access the server computer in order to make changes and make an impact on this reality?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's all that matters. I keep trying to remind myself when I go off on a mystic tangent of speculation. I keep trying to say, okay, what's the purpose? What's the usefulness of this right here, right now, in this life, for this lesson, or for this way I have of possibly being of service? You know, because the speculations and the rabbit holes, they're so fascinating, and you dive down them, and, yeah, you can learn stuff, but I'm just wary of distractions, and getting into dramas and self-inflation, because I've been there. I mean, when I was 19, 20 years old, I was involved with a woman who did trance channeling, and it was all about, very, dramatic stuff and very ego inflating stuff. And who knows, some of it may have been true, but, it took me a while to recover from the damage of that, and made me very wary of trance channeling, for very good reason. Folks out there, if you want to dabble with that, don't. Just take my word for it.
I totally agree. I trust people that are talking to spirits. I don't trust people that are
Yeah,
allowing spirit to come through your
yeah,
body.
yeah.
Sorry. Don't agree with it. And that's not what it is. It wasn't like John Kennedy was speaking through me. It was I was him. I was in him. I
Yeah.
was getting the experience that he had. I wasn't influencing it at all. I was just like, oh, wow, that happened. It's like, getting a little piece of information from a file. Oh, wow. You know?
We are.
Okay, so we're at the end of the show. That was, we didn't know what we
How
were going to
about that?
talk
I
about,
was
but we
kind of
seem to be
trusting
real talkers, huh?
that between the two of us. And Eleni's been listening, and next time maybe we'll persuade her to
Yeah.
add her wisdom and humor and liveliness. I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Well, I think everybody, like I told her, we had asked her on, and she said no, she didn't want to do that. But the reason that I have these radio shows is so that we talk about this stuff and put
Yeah.
that energy into the collective. So it might sound a little crazy to you people, but it may not to a lot of other people out there that go through the
Right.
same
And
weird
let's
things we do and go, what the hell was that about? If we don't talk about them, how do we know? We have to nurture our imagination, and
exactly.
you're
And
good
so
at that, and I
I
am
just
good at
want to
that.
encourage you,
Imagination.
Nancy, to put a nice, benign title on this show. I think it was a really good show. And if it's not like we're using some instantly censorable title that YouTube will just ding us on, right? Because we have been deleted a time or two, right? I don't know, but I mean, hey, the good news from the front lines of the cosmic struggle or whatever. I don't know, but I think this is a good one. I hope it stays on YouTube.
Well, I've gotten so that I don't use certain links
Oh, okay.
because the links have been censored, and they'll censor
Right.
you
Okay.
because you made the link. So, okay, we're going to leave you now.
All right.
I'm going to play the outro, Michael, and I so appreciate you being here. And Eleni, thank you for the energy work and those others that
All
were
right.
here for this. And we'll
Radio
be
5G signing
on
off. See you
YouTube.
next time, folks.
So, thank you for listening. May it be.
Let it